Top 3 ways to help organizations retain their physicians and decrease burnout. There's so much talk about getting physicians to be well, developing wellness programs on the individual level, and I think that's great. We know that works. However, how many people actually talk about the organizational at the organizational level to understand what are the things that we can do as a company, as a hospital, as a practice to improve physician wellness so that we can all survive. So we have a special guest today. My name is Dr. Elsie Coe. I'm the founder and CEO of Lead Physician Online Leadership Program and also the CMO of American Endovascular and Amputation Prevention. Go to our YouTube channel and subscribe to be notified for any future videos. We're going to be talking to Dr. Paul Deshant. Okay, and he has written a book. He's an expert at physician burnout, preventing physician burnout. Get the book. He's co-authored in this book, curing the chaos and returning joy to the practice of medicine. And let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Deshant is an physician expert at burnout, and he's an executive leadership coach, and he helps organizations reduce the risk of physician burnout through a process called lean transformation. What is that? Let's have him tell us. Let me bring him on here. Hi, Paul. How are you? Good to see you.
Hi, Elsie. I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about, why you wrote this book, and let's focus in on the organizational piece.
Sure. I got into leadership because practicing as a family doctor, I wanted the empowerment to fix what was wrong in my clinic. Every day things went wrong. And eventually, as I worked my way up leadership roles, I became CEO of a 300 physician group, led that group through a transformation over 5 years with a theme of returning joy to patient care and using lean as a management system and culture, which most people understand lean is all about efficiency. In fact, it's really about cultural change of deep respect for people and then empowering them to fix the problems that they deal with every day. They know what their problems are. They have good solutions. They rarely get the chance to implement their solutions because of the approach that we take. So, in those 5 years, by the end of that time, we got recognized as the top performer among 170 medical groups across the state of California 2 years in a row, and drove our physician satisfaction up to P87 on AMGA's provider satisfaction survey. So we knew we were onto something. I actually then joined the consulting firm that helped me do that transformation. Their name was Simpler. They since have merged into IBM Watson Health. But working with them is when I wrote the book, initially with a partner, Diane Shannon, a fantastic coach for physicians who are burning out. And then have been on my own for about the last 4 years, coaching leaders in health systems about how to do this.
Right.
The focus, I love what you're asking, what are the top 3 things we should focus on? In the Stanford WellMD model, there are 3 areas of focus. The first is resilience. Lots of people, as you said, are doing great work there. So I don't focus there as much. I focus on the other 2. The second one is practice efficiency, which is what we as doctors really care about. Can I focus efficiently on what's most meaningful to me, directly connecting to my patients, doing procedures that are life-saving or relieve suffering, and mentoring young people as they're preparing to join our profession, or redesigning healthcare. Those are the things that motivate us, and yet we only spend about 1/3 of our time doing those meaningful things, and 2/3 of the time is wasted on administrivia, like typing data into the EHR, like fighting with an insurance company about a prior auth, or chasing all over the hospital looking for a wheelchair, or figuring out if the printer's going to work. That stuff is all waste, and yet we spend 2/3 of our time doing that. Imagine if we could invest in redesign to flip that ratio and spend 2/3 of our time on meaningful work and only 1/3 of our time on necessary administrivia. How transformative that would be. So
let me just show the diagram that you put in your book. This I love. And this is kind of where you're talking about the resilience piece. In the middle is a physician, and then you're talking about the workplace efficiency, and then the external drivers. Is that what you're saying?
So yes, in fact, a key theme that everyone should understand, particularly leaders, is that the problem with burnout is the workplace. It's not the workers. We by definition, we're resilient. Doctors and nurses are incredibly resilient people. The problem is the workplace has become so challenging to work in because of those external factors, that outer ring that you see there. Things that have happened over the last 20 years, the EHR changes in reimbursement processes, changes in governmental regulations, all of these things have impacted the workplace. And actually, this leads us to the next area of focus. When we think about the three things, which is really a management system and culture of leading the organization, because it's that management system and culture focused on creating a great workplace that's so important. And the leaders, the C-level leaders who have the control over budget, staffing, workflows, et cetera, have been struggling themselves trying to cope with all those external factors. None of them wake up in the morning thinking, how can I make my doctors' lives more miserable? They wake up thinking, and I did this as a CEO myself, how am I going to cope with all this external stuff so that the people who are doing the work on the front lines can just do their job?
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
there are CEOs who need to understand more about operations so they can better perform that role. And that's a major focus that I have, is connecting to CEOs to help them, to help them be able to be more effective and be less stressed about the role that they're doing. Because there is technique involved in that, and cultural change that's involved in that is important.
I love in your book that you have each piece of this in your book. And let me just show the book again. And also, you have call to action plans that you can implement in your organization at the end of the book. And then you talk about, and we don't have time to talk about all of this. So I just want you to simply go through a very quick explanation of this A3 process that you talk about that you do when, as a consultant, you go to organizations to help them.
Yeah. So again, thank you for actually bringing this issue up, because so many people have not experienced lean well. They've had some efficiency expert come in and tell them how to change their job. And that's not what this is about. This is about respecting the brilliant knowledge workers that clinicians are and empowering them to identify the problems and make the fixes. And so I think of the A3 process very much like how we care for a patient. And it starts with the first step in an A3 is the problem statement, which is really, it's really the chief complaint that the patient comes in with, and let's just start an analogy of saying somebody's coming in with, they're short of breath. So we call it dyspnea, right? The question then becomes, what's the current state of that problem? And we use metrics to measure it, like respiratory rate, heart rate, temperature, other findings that we get. To help understand where we're at in the current state. So that's number 2, the current state. The number 3 is the target state. Where do we want that patient to be? Where does that patient want to be? Where do we want to help get them to? What's their homeostasis, or the best health that they can be in? That's the target. And so with dyspnea, maybe somebody's coming in, the respiratory rate's 30 and we want it to be 16. How do we need to then understand what is the gap between those two, the current state and the target? So that's the next step. Number 4 is the gap analysis. And we go through a process of differential diagnosis, because we need to understand, is somebody, what's the reason for their dyspnea? Is it asthma? Is it CHF? Is it anemia? Is it pneumonia? The treatment we're going to implement and the effectiveness of it varies tremendously based upon what the actual root cause of that gap is. Once we have a good sense of the root cause of the gap, then we go to the next step, which is, we call it if we, then we, or what are the solutions to try? So if our presumptive diagnosis is that this person has congestive failure, then we're going to try a diuretic and see what that will do. Now, if they have asthma, that diuretic is going to make them worse. So we do a test trial, and that's the next step, is to do a pilot project on whatever that improvement process might be. But we do that rapid experiment. We give them a bolus of Lasix. If they get better, great. We're going to enhance that and start doing other things that'll treat CHF. But if they get worse, we have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, well, maybe it's not CHF, maybe it's asthma, maybe it's pneumonia, maybe it's something else that we need to be treating. Once we know that rapid experiment has worked, then we develop our formal treatment plan. And that's the next step, number 7. So in improving a process, once we've tested a process, a workflow, then we're going to make sure that that gets implemented, and we get very specific. Who is going to do what by when, and we map that out, track that, write that down, and track that over time to see that it's improving. From there, we look at the values, the changes. We actually then have a track the change moving from that initial state to that target state, just like we follow someone's vital signs and other parameters. And once we know they're stable, then the treatment plan changes. They move out, and in the outpatient setting, we continue to follow them. The last step in that process, the 9th step, is insights. What did we learn from this process that'll help inform us the next time we do this? Same thing in process improvement as it is in caring for a patient. So once we demystify that A3, that problem-solving process, most doctors and nurses can relate to it pretty well. And then it's easier to understand why we're doing what we're doing when we go into such depth to solve the complex kind of problems that happen in workflows.
I have to say, initially when I was reading this, I was like, this could be very overwhelming for organizational leaders. Where do I start? I mean, what are my metrics? How far should I reach? I love that you wrote this quote. You said, halving the bad and doubling the good. We should be at least, going incrementally. Think about it in that way. It would be less overwhelming for leaders to, try to make small changes, and those small changes transfer to such huge changes in outcomes, in efficiency and productivity and revenue.
You're right. And what's really amazing, and I didn't understand this at first, it blew me away as I realized that when you do that sequentially, so say every year we're going to have the bad or double the good, but year on year it starts to become exponential. So you get to either huge amounts of improvement, doubling the good, or insignificant amounts of problems because you've halved the bad year on year. And the ability to make that kind of radical change is something we don't even believe we can do until we actually do it. And then we want more. So,
fantastic. Paul, how can people reach out to you? I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions and maybe even organizations who could use your help. What contact information can we share?
Yeah, so there's my email address, paul@pauldeshantmd.com. That's linked to my website.
MD, Paul Deshant,
Oh,
MD.
I'm sorry, it's pauldeshantmd.com. Yeah.
Okay. And your website?
And the website is pauldeshantmd.com is the website. And then I've also just recently joined with a retired hospital CEO, and the thought of a physician and a hospital CEO collaborating strongly together on these things can blow people's minds a little bit. But Bruce Cummings, who's my partner in this, is fantastic. And so we have a group now we call Organizational Wellbeing Solutions, which is really dedicated to help C-level leaders who are seriously interested in fixing the workplace so that we can not only reduce burnout, but get the other benefits that come from it. Improved staffing, less turnover, improved financial margins, the things we need in order to actually have viable organizations, resilient organizations, not simply resilient people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for what you do. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. My name is Dr. Elsie Coe. If you have a topic on physician leadership, please reach out to me at info@drelsiecoe.com and join us if you're looking for leadership transformation yourself for physicians and providers. Go to leadphysician.org. Any last words for us, Paul, as we close here?
Yeah. So from a senior leader perspective, the more a senior leader can actually connect to their frontline people in operations, the better they'll be able to lead. And it's hard for CEOs to find the time to get out there to the front lines, but going and shadowing clinicians is the most valuable thing you can do in that process. We have information about it in the book, and I'm happy to talk to senior leaders who may want to learn more about that. Just feel free to email me. I welcome that opportunity. It's so important. And thank you, Elsie, for what you do. You make such a difference.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Until next time.